Welcome. Happy Friday. All right, so the summer continues. So for everybody out there, thanks for attending office hours, July 26, 2024, Common Era. Today we're going to be talking about IDEs. So we've got Christophe here. Christophe, it's good to see you again. It's been a little bit. IDEs is always a fun topic. It seems like there are more out there than we know what to do with sometimes. One for every flavor, and there seem to be more all the time. I just want to point out before we get going, we put in a lot of work over the last few weeks, and we've got a pretty robust content calendar forming coming up over the next couple of months. When we get to the end here, I'll give you a sneak peek into what we've got in store every week for the next month, and then we'll start rolling that out for each month. So you'll be able to see what's happening a month in the future, so everybody can plan a little bit better. Thanks for sticking with us through the dog days of the summer. We're almost to the dog days of August, but anyway, we'll get started with our typical agenda here. Welcome and introduction. I'll go first. So my name is Brandon Lewis. I am a technology journalist. I've been in the field for going on 15 years now, covering everything from embedded to IoT and all the tools, chips, software, and infrastructure, and place to help make ideas into realities. So that's me. Umesh, you want to go next?
Hi everyone, this is Umesh from Pune, India, and I've been building embedded software and hardware for IoT solution from past 10 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Zacck, you're up.
Hey everyone, I'm Zacck from South Africa, Cape Town, and I've been building software for a little over a decade now, and mostly focused on embedded now. Happy to be here.
Great. Ming.
Hi, I'm Ming. So I'm based over in France. I've been playing around with Linux for over 30 years and embedded Linux for just over 15 years now.
Awesome. And Christophe, say hi.
Hello everyone. So I'm Christophe. I'm co-founder of Embeetle IDE. So we built an IDE for microcontrollers, and that's why I'm here.
Cool. Well, let's get right into this. So today's topic is the best IDEs for IoT development. So obviously, I just sort of did a little prelude into all this. There are different IDEs for different use cases, and it seems like there are more and more all the time. Recently, one that's been very popular in the space has been VScode. Before that was Eclipse. Eclipse is still really widely used. And then obviously we've got new entrants like Embeetle, which are really targeting microcontroller class development. So some of them, each of them have their pros and cons. Some are better in certain use cases than others, especially depending on what language you're using and what the use case is and what the tools are that you need. So today we're going to go through a few different options and talk about whether we've used them, what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and see a little bit about what the future of integrated development environments may hold. So disclaimer, Christophe has developed an IDE of his own. It's called Embeetle. Christophe, you want to start off by just telling us a little bit about Embeetle before we get into the next section, which is a little bit of a surprise for you guys?
Yeah, so a fun story around Embeetle is that I started working on this IDE around 6-7 years ago. I was at my first job. I had to program microcontrollers in Eclipse, and I hated Eclipse with a passion. It was just way too complex and so many buttons, so many menus, and I tried to do something about that, and that's how I stumbled into building Embeetle. First, I started off by myself, which was, well, like a humongous task that I wasn't able to do just by myself. I quickly found out. But luckily, I found several engineers with a similar mindset who also found, like, Eclipse, which was at that moment the most popular IDE for microcontrollers, was just, too complex to use. So that's how we started.
Cool. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about Embeetle on the progression through the slide deck. But like I said, I have a little bit of a surprise in store for you guys. Quiz time. I don't know if you have, what all of the IDEs that you all have experience with. I'm sure that all of you have experience with Eclipse in one form or the other. Even if you don't know it, you probably have experience with Eclipse. But I want to see how well you guys know what these environments look like. And I've got 6 or so of these lined up. The first one is this. So which IDE is this? Anybody want to take a stab? It's written there.
No idea.
Yeah, it's kind of written there.
Maybe
So
everybody knows.
Yep. And so I'm going to go through, high level pros and cons, and if you guys want to throw in your sort of take on these IDEs as we go through them if you've used them. So obviously Arduino, this is probably the gateway drug today for most developers who are getting involved in programming of certainly embedded in IoT systems. Great thing is it's really accessible. It's easy to use. Some of the drawbacks is if you're trying to do something, a little bit more sophisticated, more advanced, Arduino is probably not going to have all the support and all the features that you need. Christophe, please.
Yeah. Well, obviously I'm biased. I mean, I invested like 5 or 6 years of my life in building an IDE, so of course I'm biased. But there's one con I want to add to the things you wrote there. The biggest con, in my opinion, is that in Arduino most things are hidden. So what I mean is, like, the driver code, all things that like the linker script, the driver code, the assembly startup files, they're all hidden somewhere. They're not in your project. Some of these files are automatically generated on the fly when you build your project, and they end up in some hidden folders and then get deleted afterwards. And I feel very, very uncomfortable about this, because I'm the kind of engineer who wants to be in control of my software, and this feels like I'm handing out control to some system that hides it from me. That's my take.
I'm glad you added that there at the end, because I think it's important for developers who are starting out, or maybe who've been developing for a while and are in the Arduino environment to understand, potentially what some of the limitations are, right? If you don't have like pretty clear and accessible visibility into your files, right, this can become a big problem later on. Can you explain why that? Well, I mean, you just don't like it, but can you explain why that may be a problem, Christophe?
Well, exactly what you say is, it usually is not a problem when you start out with Arduino as a embedded software engineer, but once you want to grow, once you want to make more professional software, then you have to be in control, because there can be some driver file that has a bug that you need to fix, or you need to, for example, to fine-tune certain things in your drivers. But if the drivers are out of reach, then you can't do it. I mean, you give away control that you need if you want to take things professionally, Yeah,
for sure.
That's a problem.
For sure. How about anybody else? Umesh, Zacck, your thoughts and experience with Arduino IDE? Oh, one last thing is, this is just the one biggest con and the one biggest pro. So I think Christophe might have more to add about most of them, but I just picked one for each.
Well, I think the biggest con is what you say, lack of debug and testing tools is perfectly correct. Also, the lack of visibility into the driver files. Aside from that, I don't see many cons. I think there is a lot of good stuff about Arduino to be said. So, yeah, many of these things. Sorry?
I was asking Umesh if you wanted to add something.
Sorry.
Okay, so for me, I love Arduino IDE. Basically, I keep it very simple. But if I have to say like what one thing that I love and the one thing that I hate, let's talk about the good part. It's still be the easiest to use. I mean, it's still lightweight. It doesn't take so much space. It's just click it and then it will be installed. You can also use the browser version if you want to, which is where I have the problem. Like the part that I hate is it asks you to sometimes to log in to sign up, and I'm seeing this pattern is across all the IDEs, even all the professional IDEs, especially from past 2 months, because probably they want to collect the data. But whatever, but if you have to sign in or log in all the time, then when you open up the IDE, it takes some time because it has to connect to the network and pull all the repositories, your code from the cloud. And I don't know, but I don't like that part because it takes a time, and it's just asked me to connect to network, which I hate, even if I have a network, but I don't like that part. Yeah.
It's like the Internet of Things. It's like it's great until your network goes out and all of a sudden your fridge doesn't work and your lights go off, right?
Oh yeah, this is amazing part. Like let's say if you always use the development environment and you log in all the time, and all of a sudden your network goes away, then it's just moving all the way. Something is happening, processing, and then it just goes away. But you have to wait. You have to have a patience, and it just goes away when it fails. Couple of times it will send the request to the server, and maybe when the server doesn't respond, then but we don't know how many time it sends the request, right? But apart from these things, and one thing I would like to add, the older version of Arduino IDE I love the most than the newer version, because I don't like this this library manager and board manager onto the left pan, project pan. So I think it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can keep it on the tools, or you can keep it on a left pan, and left pan, even if you can click at the button and then it will be hidden, right? So what's the point? I mean, but it's nothing to complain about it. It's just if nobody likes it, just hide it. That's it.
All right. Well, that's the first one. Let's move to the next. What's this? Any guesses which one this one is?
Yeah, that's Eclipse.
Eclipse.
That's-
It's a favorite from Christophe.
It brings back nightmares already.
Yeah, this is Eclipse, and I know that Christophe has a lot to say about Eclipse, but I'm gonna before he jumps in with a machete, I want to ask, Ming, when you got started, what was the development environment landscape like?
It was crude. The main options were you using Vi or were you using Emacs? There we go. Those are your two choices.
For sure. For sure. When did Eclipse come around? Was that late 90s, early 2000s?
I thought it was about early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. And the development environment, like what we consider now like an integrated development environment, this was at least there was like, I think NetBeans started coming out around this time too. Eclipse was really one of the early IDEs, and I think that that's probably why it's so pervasive, and also why, you know, there's so many different IDEs. Like a lot of these semiconductor vendors, their environments are built on top of Eclipse, right? But there's a negative parts of being around for a really long time, like for anybody who's ever used Microsoft anything. Christophe, what are your thoughts on Eclipse?
Well, the biggest con you mentioned there, performance. I know why. It's so bad, the performance. The code base of Eclipse is 69 million lines of code. And that was like 5 years ago when I got that number. So probably now it's already 80 or 90 million lines of code, reaching probably close to 100 million. It's bigger than Windows, by the way. Windows is only 50 million lines of code. So we're talking here about a software that is bigger than a whole operating system. It's nuts. It's insane. It's totally crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so slow.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
What else do you have to say?
It's a magnificent pile of technical debt, because any software that is that big is just a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what's everybody else's current feelings on Eclipse?
I think the only thing that Eclipse had going for it was cross-platform. Because it was written in Java, then it didn't matter if you were sitting on a Windows or a Linux box, you could still fire up the IDE. That was about the only thing going for it.
And now there are other options that accomplish the same thing. Umesh, Zacck, you want to throw anything in on Eclipse?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, of course, again, you know, whatever free, it's very difficult to criticize those things, because I know creating something and giving it for free is very difficult in life. Okay. One thing that I don't like is it's a project pan, which is on the left side. That's why my favorite IDE was always Atmel Studio, because it has the project pan on the right side. And I know there are very few IDs left right now of that alignment, but that's okay. And I mean, the places in the projects where I used Eclipse is with AVR and STM32 or something. The problem with most of my personal concern is you have to configure this Eclipse in order to work with your microcontroller. Okay. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not easy. So let's say if you are porting some crazy tool which is not so popular, then of course you have to struggle. And because it's not so popular tool, then you don't have a good quality documentation, and not many people are working, so there's no support. So that's one thing. Like if you go for proprietary IDE, then that's pain will be less.
For sure. Christophe, you had your hand raised.
yeah, I wanted to
You're
tell
gonna
Umesh.
tell us all the great things about Eclipse now?
No, I wanted to tell Umesh that in Embeetle, the project tab is on the right side usually, but you can move it around as you want.
Okay.
In Embeetle. So just so you know.
Cool.
Great.
All right. Next up, what's this?
That's VScode, isn't it? Or am I
Actually,
wrong?
this is PyCharm. So
It's PyCharm.
yeah, so PyCharm is actually the reason I threw this one in here. So also, this is not an expansive list of IDEs, but the reason I threw this in here is that there actually have been some chatter in the server lately around embedded AI, you know, and embedded machine learning types. So I thought I'd throw this one in there as well. One drawback here, big drawback, is that it's not free. You know, that sort of limits usually the addressable market when it's not free. And Umesh, you said it's one of the most difficult things in life is selling or giving something away for free. man, I think that's the way people sell stuff now, right? You give stuff away and then get them hooked on something, and then sell them the actual thing once they're totally committed.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't think there would be a lot of experience with this particular IDE. Has anybody used or heard of PyCharm?
Well, the PyCharm is for Python, so I don't see the link to embedded software here.
Yeah, so actually the reason I brought this up was because of AI and ML. You know, there were some AI and ML programmers, and so that's why I threw this in.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I've used PyCharm.
yeah.
Yeah, I used to use it and then moved away from it because for me, the biggest drawback actually was its single language.
Yes, right.
And that's the bit that I couldn't cope with. Because I spend, in a typical day for me, I'm programming Python, C, shell scripts, Golang, and I don't want to have different IDEs for different languages.
Yeah, actually, it's funny, and I was doing a little bit of the background on this. Everybody said, you know, I use PyCharm and VScode, or I use PyCharm and something else, which is, you know, supposed to be an integrated development environment. So, Ming, what was the cost? I think there is a free-ish version, but there's like a more advanced pro.
There is a free version, which is the version that I used to use because being Scottish, I don't like paying for things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if that has to do with being Scottish. Okay. Well, we'll go. We'll move on next. What's this?
And that is VScode.
This is VScode. So, well, here I have listed biggest pros, biggest con, features, and flexibility for both. This is probably the bell cow right now in our space, VScode in terms of IDEs. What's your guys' take on VScode and its use, its utility? Anybody?
It's my daily driver.
Yeah,
It works.
I
just
live in
works.
it all day.
Yep. Christophe, anything to add about VS Code?
Yeah, it's my biggest competitor. So obviously I'm biased, but yeah, I think it's a great IDE, but for microcontroller coding, I see lots of drawbacks. There's still a lot of configuration you have to do before you can get started with a new microcontroller. So I would say it's like, okay, it's easier than doing it in Eclipse, but it's still, there's a lot that can go wrong. It's not like, how to say, it's not like you can fire up the IDE and plug in your microcontroller and get started. That's not how it works. There's still a lot of plugins you have to install and configurations you have to make before you can actually get started. So I would say that's the biggest drawback, I think, when it comes to microcontroller programming. Another drawback is that it's based on Electron, which makes it quite heavy for the computer to run. It gobbles up a lot of memory. But yeah, I acknowledge that on modern systems, this is maybe not such a big deal.
There's one other trick. Well, one of the biggest tricks up VS Code sleeve is all of the features and flexibility and extensions, right? And a big one. What is this? To your point about microcontrollers. This is Platform IO.
Platform IO, yes.
On VS Code. So Platform So go ahead, actually. Do you want to comment on Platform IO, Christophe?
Yes, platform IO. So it's indeed making it easier to get started with new microcontroller in VScode. However, it has a similar drawback like Arduino, which is it hides away a lot of driver files to hidden folders. And yeah, I would say that that's also a problem for professional development. But yeah, I can imagine for some people they don't care, and for others it's a big deal. So depends.
Do any of the rest of the panel, do you have experience with Platform IO? Have you used it? I've used it a couple of times.
I tried getting going and I couldn't get it going. And it was with Zephyr, I think, or when we were doing that fast Zephyr thing. And I wanted to use, I think, Platform IO with Zephyr, and I couldn't. For some reason, I couldn't figure it out to get my feet on the ground and start doing stuff. And I kind of gave up on that at that point.
It's supposed to be easy.
Yeah, it's supposed to be easy, but Zacck is not the first one who tells this. I've heard from several other people the same story that although Platform IO is supposed to be easy, like plug and play, it's not always the case. And oftentimes it's like as long as everything is falling into pieces perfectly, then it works. But once something is off, it's like a house of cards that collapses because you can't fix it because everything is hidden and yeah.
So this goes back to the features and flexibility, right? You know, once you start trying to extend to support things, there is a possibility that you get into a house of cards scenario where things kind of jump off. All right.
So yeah.
No, go ahead. Were you going to add something?
No, like what Zacck says, it sounds familiar. It happens.
So we'll
yeah.
Go for it, Zacck. Tell us your experience.
I don't recall exactly what I was doing. I was probably trying to get some UART logs out of a device or something, and Platform IO. For some reason, I couldn't get to the terminal, or I couldn't even get to like running the thing, and which is kind of it's almost at a crossroads with Christophe's main, like, yes, you don't want to set up too much when you're starting, but usually when you don't have to set up stuff when you're starting, it's just coming back to bite you at some point. Like when you don't have to, like if I can't see my startup file, it's I'll run for like 3 months and then I'll have a problem and I need to change where my linker starts, and then I almost have to start afresh again, you see? So kind of scary when you can start without setting up stuff.
Right. All right. Next, what's this? Don't look in the upper left.
Node rate.
Yeah, right. So again, same sort of thing. Where we're entering a time where everything is about ease of getting started and ease of use. And I want to get all of your guys' opinions on this, whether this is good or bad, right? It's sort of the H.G. Wells time traveler thing, where you make everything easy enough, and then people don't really know how to do basics anymore. Zacck, you were talking with somebody about, what was it in the server? What were you trying to? You were going to do a session with them on.
Yeah. We were gonna do the NXP RT1060 from in a VI environment. We wanted do the make file, do the startup file, do the linker, because the guy I was speaking to is Ashraf. We've had problems. Me and him have collaborated before, and we've had problems with linkers and stuff. So we came up with this new tradition. We don't want to work on something if we can't break it down and start it from scratch by itself. And that's why we wanted to go through the effort of doing Cortex M7 from scratch, like makefile, linker, startup file, and get the thing running. And then just from there on, you can do whatever. It's the same file you'll use with Eclipse. It's the same thing you'll use with VScode anywhere. Yeah. So once you have that, it's mainly for the understanding. Once you understand your device, you can go anywhere with it.
And you should really try Embeetle, because in Embeetle, you have control over everything. You have the makefile, you have the linker script, the startup assembly files, all the C files, everything is there in your project. And actually, any project that you would open in Embeetle, you can later on just run it from the command line. You know, we don't do lock-in. There is no hidden magic in Embeetle. You see, so if you want to continue working on your project outside of Embeetle just with the command line, that's just fine. It works. And I think you will love that, because it's exactly what you mentioned here, that you don't feel comfortable not having access to your makefile and linker script and all those things, because they are hidden away from you by the IDE. It makes you feeling like losing control, right? Well, then you are the perfect, how to say, you're the kind of people we try to reach, actually, with Embeetle. So sorry for the advertisement I'm making here, but I just couldn't couldn't resist this temptation.
Okay. So I want to get Umesh's perspective on this, and then ask Ming a question about looking forward. So what are your thoughts on Node-RED, Umesh?
I use Node-RED for IoT deployments, so it's a very, very handy tool. And I have found out, like, not every project in IoT and every customer is not millionaire. So there are situations where maybe some of my customer could have, let's say, 20 or 30 CNC machines, or maybe 80 CNC machines, and then making some automotive part and being supplier to certain automotive company. And they are, because they are mechanical industry, they come from the mechanical, they don't have any in-house skill sets, even if you build something infrastructure on AWS or something. So even if you build a project and give it to them, they couldn't able to handle it. And even if you leave the industrial automation, and if you go for a smaller, like poultry or maybe some agricultural deployment, or small, where your devices and deployment is very small in this situations, I think Node-RED is very, very good tool, very handy. You can quickly create something and then deploy it for IoT, not for microcontroller. This is not a tool for microcontroller.
Ming, so we're after this session, we're going to start getting pretty hands-on. So next week is Embed is gone. What the hell do we do now, right? Or what the hell did some of us who decided to use Embed going to do now? And I've got a friend who's going to come in and talk about that. And then after that, we're going to get into bare metal, RTOS, Linux, and start getting down to brass tacks. If you're starting out, right, and that's why I thought this might be an appropriate topic to put before we start going down this path. What is the best case scenario? I mean, like, Zacck was talking about, getting down in, and into the make files and linker scripts and all that stuff. Today, as a developer, do you need to understand that? I mean, to me, it seems sort of like some of these things are getting close to and allowing the AIs to really take over huge parts of our job, right? When you're abstracting everything, right? When everything is becoming abstracted, how much of a developer are you anymore? So if you want to be a developer, where do you start? Do you start with something that makes everything super easy, or do you start with something that makes things makes your understanding very thorough?
I would be saying you want to be starting at the base level so that you understand what you're doing. Because if you haven't got that base to then build upon, you're working on building on sand.
Yeah.
That you need to understand that low level technical what is going on. So you should be starting with a simple project, complicated system, fair enough, but you start with your hello world, and then you make it more complicated from there. But don't hide what you're actually doing. Something like the Node-RED, yes, I played with it. It was okay, but it hides what it's actually doing.
Right.
It's a visual basic of programming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, when we talk about so many of the people, the companies in industry and people I talk to are concerned about there being a shortage of engineers, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if this is actually creating engineers. And I think that this is the distinction, right? Like, okay, well, you want to generate people who can solve problems, but if you're giving them if you're spoon feeding too much, you don't have minds, you have hands, right? And personal opinion. I guess. Anything else to add on this, Christophe? I know you commented already.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more with what you and Ian just said. What most IDEs are doing is spoon feeding, and hiding stuff, hiding the hard parts, and it's one of the reasons also why I started with Embeetle, because we have a few principles in Embeetle, I would say, and one of those principles is don't hide.
Yeah.
And another principle is the makefile is holy, but the idea is that what we've noticed in many other IDEs is that the IDE, would override your makefile. So, for example, I've had cases where in Eclipse I was learning how to write makefiles, and I took a project in Eclipse and I changed a few things in the makefile. I was so proud of myself, and then after clicking build, Eclipse would wipe away all I've written and put a new makefile there. So yeah, that was heartbreaking. So that's why we put that also in Embeetle, that principle. The makefile is holy, Embeetle will never touch it.
Awesome.
Yep.
What's this? Can anybody guess?
Yeah.
So I did add a con here, so don't be taken aback. All right, biggest pro, design for microcontrollers. Biggest con so far, adoption.
Yeah, that's true.
So I know you went a little. You gave us a little bit of flavor and color about this, Christophe. What do you want to say about Embeetle? That you haven't said already.
Sorry,
That you haven't said already.
Things I haven't said already. Yeah, one of the things I would like to mention is that we're working on AI integration in Embeetle right now. It will take, I think, maybe a few months at most, but maybe even faster. AI that will provide you the ability to chat, with the LLM, but an LLM that is trained on your particular microcontroller.
Okay.
So it will be a different experience from chatting with an LLM in VScode or some other IDE, which is more like a general LLM. But in Embeetle, we aim to make an AI that is specifically trained on the microcontroller you're working with. So you can ask very directed questions.
Great. Actually, that was one of the things that I have coming up on a subsequent slide, which is what's the future of some of these IDEs. What is next in the IDE space? Are we going to see more VScode types where eventually, we've got integrated so many plugins and extensions that, you can sort of have a Swiss Army knife here? Are we going to look more at more optimized IDEs for specific use cases? We looked at PyCharm. There's so many others, right, that are, just for, this specific language, this specific, optimized for this use case. And then, of course, AI and where it fits in. What do you think? I'll start with you, Christophe. Do you think IDEs are going to become more optimized, more general purpose, both? Like, what's without giving away too much? What's your roadmap for Embeetle? Do you want to stay in microcontroller land? I know.
Oh yes, absolutely. We are not going to make the next Swiss knife. We really stick to the niche of microcontrollers. Absolutely, no doubt.
Very good.
When I look at VS Code, I think one of the dangers for VS Code, but future will tell, is that it will become the next Eclipse, that it will get more and more plugins and more features and grow in complexity. Because there's this saying that complexity takes the space that it's given, And in Eclipse, this is very well, it's the, how to say it, it's the best example of this principle. Over 10 or 20 years, Eclipse has grown way out of proportion and complexity has taken all the space it was given. I don't know about VS Code if maybe complexity will also take root there, unless the people making VS Code really fight the complexity creep, the feature creep. Future will tell. I don't know.
Or hopefully just pass it off to all the plugins and extensions, right? And try and keep VS Code as slim as possible. Abhishek says he uses NeoVim. That's his daily driver today. And then, you sort of beat me to the punch there. Integration of AI, the LLM, the chat assistant kind of thing is a no-brainer, right? That's sort of the next place to go. What about tooling? I don't know if you've thought, Christophe, and then I want to ask everyone else. I don't know if you've thought about, integrated tooling. And then, I know that some of the static analysis guys, for example, are using AI, to assist in some of that. Do you have any opinions on AI-based tooling?
Well, we have in Embeetle a static code analyzer, but it's not yet using AI. At the moment, it's not yet integrated. But yeah, in the future, we might also enhance it a little with AI. But I think the main integration of AI, at least in Embeetle, will be the ability to chat with an LLM that is pre-trained on your microcontroller, on the data sheets of your microcontroller. So it can provide relevant information. Like if you want to ask your AI, how do I how do I configure this pin to be a general purpose IO output? It will give you an answer that's based on the datasheet from your microcontroller. While if you ask it to ChatGPT, it might hallucinate and give an answer that's based on some other microcontroller that maybe is more popular and that is more present in the training data, you see. So,
what are the architectures? Like how many architectures does Embeetle support right now?
How many architectures? You mean how many microcontroller? Let me check. So I'll send you the link here in the chat of our supported hardware. So right now we have quite some vendors, but from every vendor that you can see in the list, we only have a few microcontrollers at the moment, because that's our business model. We do a few microcontrollers from every vendor, and then we aim for making a deal with one of the vendors to do the whole portfolio of microcontrollers.
Awesome.
And yeah, we're making progress with some of these vendors that we are closing in on a deal. But yeah, it takes time. These are big companies, and they are not quick in decision making.
Yeah. Wish list. What is the biggest thing that none of your IDEs do today that you wish they did? Like, what's our next step? I mean, I think honestly, what you just pointed out, Christophe, would be awesome, right? You know, hey, look, if we can read the data sheet and this thing can help, you know, accelerate some of those parts of coding. That's really what the utility of AI, you know, is supposed to be. Like, hey, you know, instead of having me go search for all this stuff, help me come to this resolution more quickly. But if you guys had a wish list, what's the biggest pain in the ass that your IDEs are not delivering on today? Well, I can't ask you that, Christophe, because your IDE delivers on everything.
I'm actually eager to hear what everyone else here is having on their wish list, so I can learn from that.
I mean, IDEs, it's quite difficult to ask a lot out of an IDE. And something that's not covered. Eclipse used to be my favorite thing ever on earth, like for some reason. I came in at around, like, I think 2009 or something. It was still light enough that you could run it on a very small PC and whatever. And until it was too slow to run on my little Atom. Asus used to make a tiny 10-inch laptop called an Atom or whatever. Anyway, until Eclipse was too heavy to run there, then I moved to something like, I moved to Atom, which was the former Electron thing that Microsoft bought and killed. But I think if an IDE is light enough to not make my laptop go like make crazy noises, that's the best way. Then I'm comfortable in that IDE. Like, I don't know how to explain it. That's the best way I can explain. Like, if the IDE can start up quickly enough, and I can just start working. Yeah. Well, you can. Can you say performance? Just start up.
Yeah, I mean size and performance, right? You know, you don't. Yeah. You basically don't want a bunch of overhead, right?
Yes. Yeah. Quick startup. You want to start quickly, and you've just realized something. I need to open the file quickly and type this in quickly before I can move on with something of the sort.
How about you, Ming?
The trouble is, my IDE needs are really quite simple. I want something that I can edit a bunch of files. I can see my project. It's nice to have a debug, and I want a terminal. Terminal actually isn't essential because for me, I've got a large window. I've got a 3-screen setup here that I've got enough screen space for whatever I need. Performance is the big thing. On a plug-in based system, but the only thing I'd like to see would be able to have different configurations of plugins for different things. So my thing for VScode is I've got the plugins for Yocto, I've got the plugins for C, I've got the plugins for Python, I've got the plugins for Golang. No matter what I'm working on, all of those are loading up for every single project. It would be nice almost to be able to say, I only want, because I'm doing a Yocto system, I want Yocto and the DTB. That's all I care about. I don't care about Golang and C.
It's like your car seat memory setting, right? You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There you go, Christophe. All right. Cool. Well, I ran a quick poll. This was what the DevHeads were using in the community. A quarter of them on Arduino, half on VScode. We had one vote for PyCharm, and then didn't get votes for the others. But in all fairness, I didn't run the poll very long. So next, what's coming up? I mentioned this really quickly. We started building out the calendar, and we're going to start hitting it pretty hard for the rest of the year. So wipe your eyes off and come out of your summer dream state. So next week, a week from today at 1500 GMT, ARM embed is EOL. What the hell are we going to do now? When to stick with bare metal? Are you ready for RTOS? Now it's time for embedded Linux, and then a roundtable with some of the gents here over the next month. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll release the September schedule, just so that we don't end up with too many things on the event calendar. But if you go into the Discord server in the upper left at the very top, there's an events tab, and you can go in there and you can get reminders and sign up for the links for all these things. Engineering hour is on Sunday, and I'm not sure if Umesh is here. Oh, there you are. So we've got an engineering hour that's sort of starting to coincide with some of these other topics in office hours, so we can get some synergies going. Umesh, do you want to talk about what's going to be happening this Sunday in engineering hour?
So this Sunday engineering hour, we will be exploring how you can use interrupt and especially NVIC controller. So we will be diving into how we can use internal peripheral to generate an interrupt and the external interrupt using GPIO or something like that. So anybody who want to get a deeper understanding of how the NVIC controller and nested vector table or something, how it works and how the address has been mapped, I think they are welcome to join this engineering hour.
Cool. And then, yeah, there's going to be Edison and Umesh are going to be trading off over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So make sure you stick around and hit those up. I've got a couple of stashed Ask a Developers from with Christophe that we're going to run a reel for probably in the next couple of days and then publish the first part of next week. And there are a couple of parts in the hopper there, so be on the lookout for that. I also have one with Abhishek around custom packages, so for build root, so that's something you want to take a look at. And then a little bit later on, more on LDOs and building power supplies and all that fun stuff. Remember, all of those and the office hours are going to be archived on the DevHeads YouTube channel. So what can we do to get 1% better by next week? I think actually getting all of these this calendar rolling and just keeping that up to date is going to be a big improvement. Anybody have anything else that they would offer up for the 1% club? All right. Anybody have any asks, gets, or gives for the community? Anything you need? Cool. All right. Well, everybody, thanks as always for your perspectives, your grain of sand. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday for engineering hour, and then next Friday as we talk about options now that ARM is. So thanks for your time. I hope you guys have a great weekend.